For those of us tuning in from within the United States, I have a question for you. At what point did your family immigrate here? Maybe it was your grandparents or your great grandparents or even further back. Shoot, maybe it was even your parents in your lifetime and you experienced that. Or maybe it's you. Maybe you are that future parent or that current parent who immigrated to the United States in search for perhaps opportunities that you didn't feel were as readily available where you came from, or safety or security. As is the case with many fellow European lineages, such as myself, my family history, it's a mixed bag filled with half stories and, unfinished tales. And so I never knew my father's parents, and really neither did he for that matter. So every single piece of information that we find out is actually filtered through some sort of third-party perspective. And I question, what impact does that actually have? And it's impossible to know for sure, but it makes me wonder. Then on my mom's side, it's a little less complex, but we still don't have a lot of detail when it comes to the daily lives and aspirations and struggles and goals and even like their philosophies and principles. It's an elusive picture at best, and truly at the end of the day, I'm just as clueless as you are. But it's interesting because all it takes is a few generations for a complete and total disassociation and disconnection from our own family. And this takes me straight into the conversation for today, because I was blessed with the opportunity to bring on Serban into Real Resilience here with me to discuss his very own personal story of immigrating from Romania to the United States. Now, during the conversation, we dive deep into the concept of the American dream and what that is and what does that look like, what are the different perspectives. And Serban shares his personal journey of buying into what he believed the American dream to be, and then not feeling fulfilled and bursting out of this mold to become an incredibly magnetic, motivational speaker, being sought after by conferences across the United States, and I would presume across the world as well. Now, when he told me his story of traveling from Romania to the United States with just $200 in his pocket, I couldn't help but think of my own family story and how much that resonated with me. And many of us who have heard this same type of story from our grandparents. That's the beautiful part, is that no matter what you hear and hear us talk about the American dream, that this energy is still alive, that this people are willing to risk everything on this hope that things can be better and that they'll have more opportunities. And so on that note, I want to tell you that I do hope that you enjoy this conversation with Serban and myself. Thank you guys so much. Today, we have a very cool special guest. We have been on this show on Real Resilience here with me, Matthew Listali. We have been diving in deep with different guests because I didn't want to just share my expertise and my experience. I've been doing that for like a year. And so I wanted to start bringing people in to help expand my own thinking, and in hopes that we can expand the thinking of all of you who are here with us hanging out. So today, I can't tell you guys how freaking excited I am. Like, this guy's story is out of control. It's one of those stories that you hear, and I'm not going to butcher it. I'm going to have him tell us in just 2 seconds. But one of the feeling that I got when he was first telling me his background and a little bit of his story was that of like your grandparents or your great grandparents, like those people who had nothing and threw everything to the wind and to chance, and just like gave themselves up fully to making a huge change in their lives. And the cool thing is, not only has he done this once, it kind of seems like he's done it at least twice now. And so having that type of mentality, what it takes, and then how he's inputting value into people's lives, and making his life not about his American dream, but about your American dream and how you can see that come to reality. And it doesn't have to be American either. It can be, and that's one of the beautiful things that we're going to learn about in this story is this can be, it's just your dream, that future state that you have always dreamed about, that you've always wanted to get to. That's what we're going to talk about, how Serban got there today, and how what he talks about and what he teaches and his philosophies can help you to get to the next level too. So, without further ado, Serban, how's it going?
Thanks. That's an awesome introduction. You really set up the stage. Like, hi, what is it? Everybody's wondering. That's awesome. Thanks for having me.
That's a good call out on the strategy there. Yep. I just want to get people excited. Want to get them to know, like, feel that there's something powerful coming. But what is it? So before we get into what it is, because we will get there, give us a little bit of your background and like what's kind of like your current situation. If we looked at kind of like your pedigree and stuff like that right now.
Right now, okay, at the moment, we're not talking about the past yet, right? Okay. I work, I still have a 9 to 5 job. Let's just preface that. I work as a program manager for a large semiconductor company, but by night, that's when the flames rise. That's when I actually enjoy the things that I do and I'm working myself to becoming a professional speaker, and I speak a lot on the topic of mindset. And that's the main topic that we're probably going to get into with my story, because that's what helped me feel like I'm living the life that I want to live, my dream, not necessarily the American dream. And mindset has helped me do that. So it's been a journey, and the journey is, I feel like I'm a rocket ship ready to take off. I'm in the first phases of it, but I'm enjoying the ride right now.
There's so much in what you just said that's so powerful. One of the things that I think people get they get turned off by when they hear me and others talk about mindset. It's like, oh gosh, here we go again. We're going to talk about more mindset stuff. Everyone's talking about mindset. But I think that people get that feeling because there's not a lot of action associated with it. Like one of the things that drives me nuts is when somebody says, "Oh, you have to realize this." And that's the action that you take. And it's like, "Cool. Let's say I realized it."
Now what?
What do we do now? Like, how do I turn this into action? How do I turn this into something tangible? And the cool thing is, this is where we can dive into your history, into your backstory, is your mindset led to massive action with extraordinary risk, like more risk than I think almost any like native born American can even comprehend, because we're born into such, even people that live kind of poorly, if they haven't taken massive action to change their life and felt that risk, it's not something that a lot of people have felt, because we all get held back by that fear. And so I think that's the importance behind the mindset, is that the focusing on mindset opens that door, and it doesn't say don't be scared. It says you're scared. Now what do you do? Like it changes it from a wall, and it puts a door into that wall. So I want to talk about kind of like your door and how you saw that. Like, what was your situation, and what changed in your mind to say, this isn't a wall, there's a door there.
That is such a good, I think people really need to pay attention to. I don't know if you've used this before, but that's an awesome analogy. Yeah. We all see these walls in front of us and we're like, it's impossible. nothing's impossible. You must build that door. That's awesome. That's well said, Matthew.
Thank you.
All right. I came to the United States in 2005 with $200 in my pocket. I was 23 years old, and I didn't know if it was going to work out or not. I knew the situation where I was in back in Romania wasn't the best. It wasn't like I was starving or anything, but it wasn't an ideal way. And I had an opportunity to move to the United States. And like you said, that is, it's scary. It's scary. I was lucky enough that my brother actually was already here, and he gave me a corner in his room to put a mattress and sleep there. So I had that going for me, but from that point on, it was up to me to make whatever I want to make out of this opportunity, right?
I want depth. I want meat in this story. So like what were the living conditions? Like what was your family situation? What was your friends? What was the schooling? How old were you when this happened? And what was the kind of life experience that you were having in Romania? Yeah. Yep.
Interesting. I don't think I've ever told this story, and neither have I thought too much about it. Up until I was 23 and I was living in Romania, I was living with my parents, and it's not that uncommon in Romania during those times to still live with your parents up until you finish school and you get a corporate job. But I was living with my parents. I had zero responsibilities. I hadn't had to do anything else other than go to school and come back. And my parents would provide housing, food, money for whatever I needed to do. But it was very limited because my parents weren't doing that great to where I would live lavishly, right? My hometown is a fairly small town to where most of the time I would walk to anywhere, right? It's not like I would be able, we wouldn't be able to afford cars and stuff like that. So my whole responsibility was to go to school, but I had nothing else, just hanging out with my friends and partying on the weekends with the limited amounts that we had. And that was it. So, making that shift to letting go of that comfortable life and no responsibilities, having just all these friends, and then moving here, it was a quite a leap of faith, and scary, very scary. I knew that I was going to leave, and even the 3-4 months prior to is just, you question yourself: am I doing the right call? What's going to happen? It's scary. Oh, I'm backing out. Fears coming, all these negative thoughts in your head. I'm not able. I don't speak the language well. What's going to happen? So, yeah, it was a huge leap of faith. Yeah, for sure.
What do you remember, or was there an event that occurred that overtly sparked the idea that where you were at that time was not going to lead you on the path to where you wanted to be? Like what was, and kind of subsequent to that, if it is a different moment, when did the idea of moving to the United States come into play? Like, where did those kind of things intersect? So, like, when was it like, I can't do this, and the way that I'm going to change this is by going to the US? Were those the same thing, or were they two kind of different events?
I mean, there weren't too many options in Romania. Even if I would have finished school, there were limited jobs at that point in the town that I was living in, and there wasn't a lot of, you didn't have the entrepreneurs or the social media marketing manager position. There was nothing like that. So I knew that I had a very narrow window of making it in Romania and being successful. And I think at that point, especially when you're in your 20s, the biggest desire that you have is make a lot of money. money is the driver, right? And it's a big motivator. And that's where I was at that point, because we typically gravitate towards the things that we don't have, right? And my parents didn't have a lot of money. I wasn't, I worked as a DJ on the side, but I keep telling people that the work that I was doing as a DJ in 1 month, I would make here in the United States in less than a day
Wow.
with minimum wage.
Wow.
So, that desire of not being in that position really drove me to make the decision and have that leap of faith, and be it as it may, just do it.
That's incredible. And so you said that your brother was already in the US. What's the age disparity there? When did he go? Why did he go?
It's a 2.5 year between us.
Okay.
He came probably 2 or 3 years prior, and he was still settling in, right? He was still living in a 1 bedroom apartment. It wasn't like he was still struggling to make it as well. So he definitely helped me, not land so roughly. And he showed me a few things, like I didn't even know when you were talking about a phone number that you have to say the first three numbers, and then you have to say the next three, and then the four. I was just like, blah, blah, blah. And just those type of simple things that, they're normal if you're growing up here, but I didn't know coming here. So that's one of the things that my brother helped me a lot.
Absolutely. Was there when so how did your parents react when you had this idea, like, I'm gonna go to America, like I'm not gonna go to school here anymore, and the path that's built out here is not gonna go? Like, how did they react? What were their thoughts?
That's a good question. I do remember, on one hand, there were thorn, right? Because now my brother was already here. We're the two siblings that were in the family. My brother was already here, far away. They were missing him, but I think they were trying to make the best out of it. And I know my mom looked at me and said, "You guys have to be together. You should go there so that you have each other. Because when we're not going to be here, at least you guys are going to have each other." And I think she was saying that, now that I think about it, just to make me feel good, but she was probably hurting bad inside. So it wasn't an easy decision for them to let us go.
That's
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can see it, especially with one being gone. We're like, I still have one son here. Like, you're gonna leave me too?
And I was the baby.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's extra rough. Yeah, I actually had so my brother and I, we are 3 years apart.
Okay.
And we ended up actually going to like an automotive vocational school where we learned how to work on cars and kind of the science behind the mechanics and everything like that. We did that together once I graduated high school. And so we went across the country. We born and raised in Nebraska, right dead center in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went to Arizona for school, and that was like a year-long thing. He ended up going to additional training in California for Volkswagen, and I stayed in Arizona for a while before going back to Nebraska before joining the Army. But all of that to say, we had a very strong bond, and we were able to get through a lot of stuff because we were together and we had that support. And I feel like that's something that we're missing a lot of, is kind of the structural or familial support behind it. How did that impact you when you first showed up? Like, having one, obviously there was a huge support network in the fact that you had somewhere to go when you showed up, right, which makes a big difference. It makes coming here with $200 in your pocket not where you're not going to sleep on the street, the first night that you show up. So but as far as like the first couple of months getting here and you were there, were you guys just completely doing your own separate things? Like, he's still trying to get settled and you're trying to find your way? And how did that relationship dynamic impact you on your in during your transition.
Yeah, I mean, you're right that the bond was there because we weren't extremely close growing up, but because we came here and he already went through a lot of struggles to kind of have himself situated. He definitely didn't want me to struggle as much as he did to integrate and learn the ropes and not have to fall that much. But it was also the fact that at that point now we're starting to have each other's back. It's your car breaks down, he can come to get me, and vice versa. There's simple things. And also, you're in a totally foreign country. You don't know necessarily all the ins and outs. It was a good mental support having him here. And I think because I was new, I was also younger, he did adopt like a father figure to me, because a lot of the decisions that I took were always kind of leaning to, am I doing this correctly? And just like, okay, I'm gonna do that, right? So it was a lot of support that I got from him, especially because I had back home so many friends, and now I'm coming here and have zero friends, and that's
Right.
really takes a toll on. It took a toll on my psyche, just staying at Friday night at home while my brother was working all by myself. It wasn't the best situation, but at least I know that he would come home and I would have someone to talk to. So, yeah, he was very instrumental in being someone that I can lean on. Yeah, for sure.
What was the idea? Like when you came to the US, like obviously you were saying that the opportunities or many weren't robust. So there wasn't a lot of
Mhm.
variety and like pursuing something that would be meaningful to you, or
Mhm.
even potentially just monetarily meaningful. But so so when you were coming, like what was the idea? Like, I guess what was your vision of the future? Or was it just
Mhm.
there are more opportunities and I'll figure it out when I get there and we'll see what opportunities I can kind of work myself into? Or was
Mhm.
there something more clear than that?
I think it happens to all of us, where we look at our parents, we look at our environment, we look at our friends, we look at our friends' parents, and try to take cues on what would mean to be successful or feel like you make it. And I came in to the United States with this idea, especially learning it from Romania, that if you want to be successful, you have to be stable. You have to have a corporate job. You have to make sure that you save for retirement and you keep your head down. You don't make a lot of noise, because that may create some ripples that might get you fired. And a lot of it a lot of these cues I took from my environment, and that's the dream that I had. When even watching movies, the American dream for me, in my mind, it got solidified that you have to have the red brick home, and you
Right.
have to live in a cute neighborhood and have the corporate job and go on vacations here and there. And that's exactly the image that I had when coming here.
That's so that's so interesting to hear
Hmm.
that from an outside perspective of the American dream is essentially the same, right? Like there's a sort of classification behind it that I think that you nailed it when you said stability, right?
Hmm.
And part of stability is like being one of the flock.
Hmm.
It's you're not stable if the herd is moving in this direction and you're taking a moment. You're not even necessarily moving a different direction, but you're taking a moment to say, I don't know if that's the direction I want to go. Like it might be. That might be a really good direction. A bunch of people are going, and I think it's rooted back in like the concepts of evolutionary psychology, where
Hmm.
our survival was based on the success of the group. So if the group in your tribe is moving from this location to that location,
You
You're
gotta
rolling
go.
with the group. Like
Yep.
you ain't gonna survive on your own. And we've evolved so quickly, or like our societal structures have shifted so dramatically over the last 200 years. Can you
Mhm.
imagine 1820? Like in what world was like? Or go back 300 years and you think about how long humans have been around. They keep kind of pushing the dates back and back and back to the anatomically matched, like same size skull and everything. It keeps getting
Mhm.
pushed back like tens, hundreds of thousands of years ago at this point, where they're finding these matches, and you're like, okay, well, let's say, I mean, look, 500 years ago, and the scale of percentages of how long humans have been around with the same exact brain mass, 1520, and how
Mhm.
different things are today.
Right.
Uh, you know, go back another 500 years, right? Holy smokes. 1022.
Right.
It's just the incredible changes that have existed, and the it's like our ability to survive more autonomously. I
Mhm.
mean, kind of like I still really rely on people to come pick up the trash, and
Right.
I there's a lot of subtleties in the background of things running perfectly. Like, water is piped into my house. That sure is nice.
Mhm.
but but the whole point is that I think that we are biologically and ancestrally guided towards feeling safe in a group and doing
Mhm.
what the group does, because typically what the group does is going to be right, and right having the meaning of we're going to make it. Like we're going to
Mhm.
survive. So there is an internal struggle. I think it's for every single person. I don't really believe in the like I'm not a it's like I'm a low I go to the beat of my own drum. I'm on my own. I just do my own thing. I don't really care what the group does. Like
Mhm.
maybe maybe those people exist. I'm sure. I mean, there's always outliers, but I think by and large we all struggle with that, and we all get wrapped into this rat race of doing the same things that everyone else is doing. And like, how normal is it for us to get up in the morning, work 9 hours at a job,
Mhm.
sitting behind a computer, sitting on a production line, putting one like a rivet in a door, that rivet in that door, and that rivet in the next door, and that same thing. We're not built for it, but that's what everybody does.
Mhm.
That is, and especially like in your view as an individual, if I'm a riveter, literally everybody around me, it's not even that they're all working 9 to 5s, they're all riveting. They're doing the
Mhm.
next rivet. It's
Mhm.
they're putting this piece of plastic on. Like and they're doing it over and over. It's like even zoomed into the individual's world, like what you experience in that 9 to 5 is what everyone else is experiencing immediately around you. And so we get trapped by these other walls, right, of our own reality.
Mhm.
Right. And so by our own reality, we're building up this wall of familiarity. Like this is what's around us. This is what's normal. If I left this job to jump industry to change my life, like everybody around me. I'll say the last thing before I throw it back over to you. When I was in the military, getting out of the military was looked upon very negatively. And it wasn't like, oh, how dare you? You're
Mhm.
you're dishonoring the brotherhood. That wasn't it. It was, you're a fool. You're never gonna make it. Like
Mhm.
the army
Mhm.
gives you, and the army does such a good job at this. Not just the army, but the military, all of them do it. They do such a
Mhm.
good job at getting their talons in you and getting you so comfortable, because all of your dental taken care of free, all of your
Mhm.
healthcare taken care of for free. You get your base pay, but not only do you get your base pay, depending on where you live, they give you a basic allowance for housing based on your location. So when I
Mhm.
was near DC, I was getting $2,500 a month on top of my base pay just to pay for housing. And
Right.
so it's like all of these things you look at getting out, and you're like, oh my gosh. And then 50, 90% of the jobs don't translate. So like your incentives there are so, and then that's what built. And so people's fear, senior leaders, I've seen senior leaders do this to soldiers where they say a soldier that's been in for 3 years is like, I did my 3, I'm going to get out. And the senior leader who succumbed, whatever that word is, they, to their own fear, time and time again, because in the military you have contracts. So you go in, you sign an initial contract for 4 years, sign up. So that senior leader said, okay, my contract's up, I'm going to sign another one. That contract's up, I'm going to sign another one. So they succumbed to their fears multiple times before this point. And then they got comfortable because this is reality. And they see people be successful. Again, the walls of what you see. They see the people that they see that are successful aren't the entrepreneurs. They're not the business owners. They're not the guys that get out because they don't stay in touch with those guys. They see the people that are successful, the ones getting promoted in the military. And so you getting out, they say, you're going to fail. Good luck. Like that's the best thing that I've ever heard from somebody is a sarcastic, good luck. Like just with a very strongly inferred, you can't do it. And I've heard leaders say, I can't wait to see you back here in 2 years when you come and sign back up because you didn't make it on the outside. Like these are real conversations that we're having by the leaders. Leaders, I'm saying in air quotes, like unbelievable disparaging on people's future. And so
that's them projecting their fear onto you.
Exactly.
Because
exactly right.
They build those walls so much that they can't see around them, above them, anywhere else, and except their little ground. And when someone else challenges that wall of theirs, they feel the need to protect it, and that's their own fear. Yeah.
And imagine how challenging it is if you have to have that thought. You spent 15 years in the military, 15 years in anything, right? And you're there and you've been successful, right? You're doing well, but you're doing well in something that you were kind of prompted to do out of fear, right? And so it's maybe this wasn't even your dream. I stayed in for 12 years. My idea was to go in for 3.5 and then to leave to become a like a parachute, a free fall instructor.
No.
After 3 years, I stayed in for 12 because of the same thing. Like it works. They do a really good job. But yeah, so they inculcate that fear. But so what I was saying is the individual who's getting out, who says, I have a dream and I'm going to go pursue that dream. And it might be crazy. I'm going to go start a pizza restaurant. And they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, right. You. And there's an extra thing that's that guy's only been in for 3 years. That means he's probably still what we call like a Joe, like a junior enlisted soldier. Like hasn't made it through the ranks. So they haven't even proved themselves to be successful in the military. You're saying you, a Joe, you're going to go out there and you're going to own a restaurant? Like you didn't even do anything here. How are you going to do? So like there's an extra negative, but that extra negative, exactly like you said, it's bringing up all of those moments of fear, all of those re-enlistments that they did for another contract. It's like all of those emotions where they had that thought, because every single person, unless there are people that are like, I'm doing a career, no question about it. That's awesome. Dude, I don't have anything against career soldiers. I would have done it. I would have stayed for a career. I just broke my back, so I couldn't stay in. But so I got nothing against it. But the ones that had dreams, that didn't want to stay in and stayed in because of fear, those are the ones that are talking all this crap. And they are the ones, when this is happening and they're seeing it, that positive action and that follow through with it and that not succumbing to a fear throws all of those re-enlistment decisions back in their face. And it's just like, rather than dealing with their own self-disgust with their decisions, exactly like you said, they're projecting all of that onto that person, genuinely hoping that their disparagement is going to make them fail. That's so, it's evil. It's pure evil. And it's not, I'm not saying they're evil. The people are not evil. They're just, they are succumbing unknowingly to their
Mhm.
subconscious, unconscious, emotional state of trying to, you know, trying to support the decisions that they've made that got them to where they are.
Mhm.
All of that huge rant goes back to you, right?
Mhm.
So you made choices, right? You started pursuing the path of the American dream, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
what was talk about that, talk about your pursuit of the American dream, and talk about the the kind of realization, like what mental processes you started having about that dream as you were pursuing it that eventually led to a little bit of a shift, another shift.
You know, your rent, sorry to digress, but your rent got me thinking because, I was going on that path of living the already set, laid out for me American dream. And at one point I knew that I wanted something different. And like you say, there's folks who are just going with the tribe nonstop. But I was one of them, right? The American dream was laid out for me, and that's where I was going. I didn't think about it too much. That's what I've learned from society, from movies, from everybody around me. That's what they were telling me. And I thought that, I was brainwashed, and that's the only thing I knew. But if you were to look, if I'm looking back at it now, the more I open my eyes to it, is I recognize that that was a season in my life that was necessary to establish what I was yearning for the most at that stage. And that is security, safety, and comfort. Those were the things that I was lacking the most when I came from Romania. My parents, they lost their jobs. That was very scary. We didn't have money. That was very scary. So that, based on that fear, I came to the United States, and that was my drive. Like, I don't want to be in a place where we're wondering if we're going to pay rent, right? And that was the driver that got me to do all the things that the American dream was supposed to get me to do.
That's
And
so that is so that's so huge. So for people that didn't pick up what's going on, this is what the American dream is built to do. It's not built to destroy you or take away your dreams or to do anything like that. It's all positive, but it's all positive in one direction. So whenever you're thinking about taking action in your life, there are two primary mechanisms that we use for motivation. And one is a push and one is a pull, right? And so
pain and pleasure.
I've never thought about this like this until right now. I've understood what I just said. I've understood that concept for a very long time. I think actually probably the first time I heard it articulated really eloquently was by Jordan Peterson. But what really what the American dream answers, or the of those forces, what the American dream, what fulfillment of security and those Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the level one of physiological needs and the level two of security needs. What the American dream does is it's the pushing element. So it's just like you said, when you're talking about fear, that's like you're getting pushed by the fear to take action. And so
Yep.
you're acting out of a push based off fear, which is a huge motivational factor. That's how you
Exactly.
survive. If a
Mhm.
bear's running at you, you're not waiting for something to pull you away. You're running, And so you had your own bears chasing after you, the bears of fear of unemployment, of not having enough money, of not having security. That's terrifying. And you felt it, you saw it firsthand.
Mhm.
And so the American dream provides the scaffolding, a very clear structure that says you enter into this process, you're not going to have to deal with those bears. We're shutting the door behind you, but we're not telling you that we're building a wall.
Yep.
we're not
Yep.
we're not going to tell you that we're cementing that door shut.
Yep.
Like, but you don't have to worry. You don't have to think about the walls because the walls are there to protect you. You're
Mm-hmm.
protected. You don't have those fears anymore. You're safe. You're secure. You got that paycheck. You're going to be able to pay for your meals. Walls are
Mm-hmm.
protecting. But those same walls that are protecting you are also keeping you caged in and blocking off access to that other huge motivational force, which is the pull. That the real American dream, the true essence of what it means to be an American, to me, is that we have the freedom to aggressively, passionately, unapologetically pursue what it is that drives us
Mm-hmm.
in a manner that benefits the people around us. To me, that's what it means to be here and to be able to do that however you see fit for your life. Whatever passion calls you, pursue that and make as much gosh darn money as you possibly can in doing so. I'm not saying that this is the best dream. I'm saying that that's what I think the American dream is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
I what it is now, it's those walls. It's that
Mm-hmm.
protection from the push. You don't have to worry about the push. We're going to remove your motivation by putting you in a system where you're taken care of. Don't worry
Mm-hmm.
about it. We got you. Don't worry
Yep.
about saving for retirement. We're going to yank it from your check. We'll give you Social Security. You know what I mean? It's just like, don't worry. That's the American dream in practice is
Well
don't
said.
worry. So you were in it. You
Yeah.
bought in. I bought in.
Yeah, full force. Yeah, for sure. And for a while it was really good. It gave me that comfort. I checked all the boxes and I'm comfortable. The walls are coming up. I'm adding layers to it. I feel comfortable. And that pain that pushed me was alleviated.
That's a
But then the
good
question,
feeling.
it was for a while until the question was, is there more? Right?
Was there?
Well, that's what I racked my brain for almost 2.5 years. It's just like, is there more to this? Right? Because once I was able to check the boxes and get the red brick home and have the cushy job and be comfortable, then I started being okay. Right? You get that external satisfaction or comfort, but then up here we're humans. We want more. As time goes, we want to grow as well. And I just started being uneasy. That's all I can tell you. I would go to bed Sunday night and I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would do a staring contest with my watch and not know what is going on. I had everything. All of it was fine, you know? And I keep talking about this principle. Job was fine. My relationships were fine. My home was fine. Security was fine. Safety was fine. But nothing was great. Nothing was fantastic. And that's where I started struggling to be. I fulfilled the American dream, but what is my dream? And that's when the questions started coming up and I started being uneasy.
It's something that we are we have grown to embrace is the feeling of ease and the feeling of comfort.
Mm-hmm.
It's from the moment we wake up in the morning, we're wrapped in comfort. We're literally in our blanket of comfort in our house that's providing heat or air
Mm-hmm.
conditioning, whatever the season demands,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a battle with ourselves from the moment that we wake up, from the moment that we made a promise to ourselves the night before that says, and when you make that promise, you're setting an alarm. That's making a promise. You're making a contract with yourself. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to wake up at 6 a.m. When you hit snooze, you're breaking that contract,
Ooh,
you
that's
know,
really
and
good.
it's, and when, when you start your day off by violating a sense of trust with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
that's not a good note to kick the day off with.
Mm-hmm.
There's never going to be a time. I use this kind of this game, this thought process with my kids and with professionals that I work with all the time. Where I say that, like, for this instance specifically, there's never going to be a moment in your life where you say, I really wish I didn't wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. But there's never going to be a moment where, like, God, I wish I didn't get up so early. Oh, why did I do that? Like, you might feel tired that day, but
Mm-hmm.
the amount of stuff, I'll tell you what, the amount that my business has grown, the amount of effective work that I've been able to accomplish between 5 and 8 in the morning, it's as much as the next 3 days of actual work, of like 9 to 5 work hours. It's
Mm-hmm.
incredible. And a part of it, I believe, has to do with this this energy that you're feeling, this like, I won. You know why I won? Because I look outside and you know who's up? Nobody. I'm up. I'm the one doing it. Not you. Almost nobody's up right now, but I
Mm-hmm.
am. And so there's like this extra surge of, let's go. You know, like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna get, and it's combined with the fact that the reality, nobody else is up, which means that you're not
Mm-hmm.
getting emails. Your kids aren't asking for this, that, or the other. You're not worried about doing this for your spouse. Like, it's 100% you time. And
Mm-hmm.
so you get to throw yourself wholeheartedly into whatever it is you're doing, you know, and so whatever it is that you want to do. And I'll tell you what, you know what's uncomfortable? You know what's uneasy? Getting up at 5 in the morning without a plan.
Oh,
Get up at 5 in the morning
I was gonna say.
without purpose. One, good luck actually doing that. Good luck getting up at 5 without, like, I'm gonna make sure to work out before I start this day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna make sure to write 1,000 words towards the book I've always dreamed about writing. Or I don't know, maybe it's not even the book, maybe it's just a book. I've always wanted to write a book. I'm gonna write 1,000 words. There's got to be something there, because you go and sit in your office. But I'll tell you what, there's nothing bad that's going to happen if you get up at 5, you don't have a plan, and you go sit down behind your computer without the
Mm-hmm.
Wi-Fi connected, turn off your Wi-Fi, and just sit behind your computer. I guarantee you, there's not a single. Again, it goes back to that same game that I play. There's never going to be a moment in your life when at 5:30 in the morning, you spent the next 30 minutes behind your computer with just a blank canvas, or a literal canvas with paints, like,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, whatever your thing, with your guitar. You know, like, there's never going to be a moment where you're going to be like, God, I wish I didn't dedicate 30 minutes to learning to play the guitar every morning. Like, it's never going to happen. Good luck.
And I'll add one thing to this is because apparently we're the same. I wake up at 5 o'clock as well, and I always have a plan. But there's so many of us who wake up at 5 and just jump right to emails and start going with their day and getting frustrated and all of this. I assure you that work will never end. If you started at 5 or if you started at 8, it's still going to be there no matter what. So if you're able to take that first part of the day, like you said, to dedicate it towards yourself and have that plan to do something consciously that is filling your soul and filling your bucket, that's more important than responding to 5 emails.
Oh, that's so powerful. That's so true. Oh, it's I learned that lesson.
Mm-hmm.
This memory haunts me to this day. I feel like I just spent like 10 minutes yesterday or the day before wallowing in this thought, in this memory. And it was I was working in the 82nd Airborne. I was a paratrooper living the airborne dreams of my life. Like I it's one of those internal networks of like in the army where like we brewed our own Kool-Aid that the whole cult drank, like
Mm-hmm.
it's bad. But I brewed it. I was the one brewing it. I was the one pouring in the ingredients. Like I love this stuff. And but when it came to the actual work and not just jumping out of the airplanes, I was in Intel. I managed like security clearances and a bunch of admin crap. Right. And so but it was a lot of work. It was all,
Mm-hmm.
and it was literally like you said. I would show up, I would do work. We would start physical training PT in the morning at 6:30. We'd be out there for formation. We'd salute, we'd sing our little song, and then we'd go work out. Um, I'd show up to work at 5. So I'd be at work at 5. I'd work for an hour and a half before PT, go back, shower, blah blah blah, blah, work the whole day. Everyone would leave, and I would continue working for another 2 to 3 hours. And I did that for in that unit for like 2.5 years. That was every single day. I would go in on the weekends and I would work.
Mm-hmm.
No one asked me to. No one said you have to have this done, but I knew the deadlines and I knew what I had to do. And it was, I was doing one job of like 7 different people. And so
Mm-hmm.
I demanded excellence of myself. I demanded like perfection in what I was doing. And so I spent a lot of time doing it. And one day there was this girl that I worked with who was incredible. She was like she worked in a form of military intelligence, um, but on the technical side of support. So like she worked on like the server stacks that
Okay.
stored secured information. And in a brigade, which is like 4,000 people, you'd get like 2 of them. You get like 2 of these people. And
Right.
so they were gold if they were good. Most of them weren't good. Most of them didn't care. And they were just like, oh, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
No one knows what I do exactly. So I just do whatever I want. So as long as everything's working, no one bothers me. This girl was not that way. She was a
Mm-hmm.
pro. She was like me. She's like, I'll work. She worked her ass off. And we were always going, me, her, and a couple other people would always go first on missions to like set things up before everyone else showed up to go do the mission. So me and her were always there first. And so we developed a really, really good relationship, really strong working relationship, so much mutual respect and just like and trust and all of this.
Mm-hmm.
She ends up getting accepted to go into a very elite unit, like a joint special operations command unit. And it was just like premiere of premiere. And so we were doing her farewell. It was like, so whenever anybody comes, we do a hail. So we do like a big lunch event where we
Okay.
hail all of the people coming in. And then when
Mm-hmm.
individuals leave, we do an individual farewell. We say, okay, we'll go there. We're going to give you like a gift from the unit. It's usually like a plaque with like a picture of you doing work there and all of like these awards that are kind of presented that you can hang up on the wall or like a sword, whatever. Every unit has their own thing.
Okay.
Just as like a memorial, like remember your time here, you did great things.
Right.
So we'd set up this really big elaborate farewell for her, and instead of going, I stayed at the office and I worked through lunch.
Mm.
And my boss at the time, who we didn't get along, um and he was, yeah, doesn't matter, but he shows up towards the end of lunch, maybe 15 minutes left in lunch, and he's like, hey, this is where you're at. And I was like, yeah, I gotta do, I think these reports have got to get turned in, and it's gonna be
Mm-hmm.
late by this afternoon, and I had to get it done. He's like, yeah, I won't say her name, but like we were there at her farewell. And I was like, yeah, I know, I really wanted to go. He's like, she was asking for you. Like she was like, where's Sergeant Lost? Everyone called me Lost. No one knew how to say my last name.
Mm.
Like, where's Sergeant L? Like and he's like, I didn't have anything to tell her because I didn't know where you were, and you're here. And he just left it at that and walked away. And that has that like claws at my soul to this day.
Mm-hmm.
I after she ended up getting out of the military later, and so did I. I ended up like messaging her and talking to her and be like, dude, I told her, I was like, I still think about that to this day. And like,
Mm-hmm.
I feel awful. She was like, don't, you're fine, blah, blah, blah. But I could even tell in the messages that she's like,
Yeah.
come on. You know?
Right.
So, but it's all of that to your point of like, we we look for those things. Like we look to be busy because there's pride in
Mm-hmm.
being
Mm-hmm.
busy. There's a value placed on being busy, and that is one of the downfalls is that you lose sight, like when you don't have a clear idea of why you're busy or what you're busy for, what's the bigger
Mm-hmm.
purpose, and
Mm-hmm.
that then you become a slave to the work rather than having work be a tool that enables your future,
Yeah.
and so and it's hard to do that when you're working for somebody else, when you're not taking ownership over your own stuff, because you're already kind of like enslaving your time. Like you've made a deal, I will
Right.
trade time for money,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know but
Yeah.
so for you, you're working, you're in the thick of the walls of the American
Mm-hmm.
dream. You're cut off from pain, but you're also cut off from hope and the dream of the future. But you
Right.
start to get uneasy. You start to get a
Mm-hmm.
sense of this, and it's eating away at you, right? Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. The American dream was checked off. Yet there was nothing else in the future, right? The walls were there, the comfort, but there was no pool, nothing. And
So
that definitely made me uneasy, restless. You wake up Sunday night and another week has gone, another month, another year. What's going on?
once you get to that point, it's crazy when you get to a level that there's like a dollar amount where it's I think they did a study and it was something like $60,000. Not a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
$60,000 earned a year
Mm-hmm.
changes your brain, where nothing else, it doesn't matter the same way. As 0 to 60 is different than 60 to a million. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's an entirely different mindset, because you're going from that survival, scrapping, like clawing your way up, and now almost anywhere, your basic, those bottom two rungs of Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Mm-hmm.
say, physiological needs and safety, they're fulfilled. At
Mm-hmm.
60K, they're fulfilled. And so from
Yep.
there, you can easily get into this state of, well, let me just, well, in the military, we call it like improving your foxhole. And that is an analogy that we would use for like everything. So, like when you first dig a foxhole, like you just dig into the ground, right? And you have a
Uh-huh.
hole. And when you're improving it, you make a grenade sump. You dig a little hole into the side where you can put your radio. You build up your sandbags. You build an overhead cover. You camouflage it bit by bit by bit. And so,
Mm-hmm.
like, that is what I think we trick ourselves into as being a part of the American dream, is
Mm-hmm.
that instead of continuing to dream, we
Mm-hmm.
stop dreaming because we've hit 60K
Yep.
or whatever that is for you that makes you feel, oh,
Yep.
you know, and then you start to improve your foxhole. You're like, oh, well, I can get a nicer car now. Oh, we can get a bigger house. Oh, we can go on that like you said, we can go on that vacation once
Mm-hmm.
this year,
Yep.
but I can't ask for another one because heaven forbid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, so you're uneasy. You're asking yourself these questions. What were the like the powerful questions or that narrative that was happening inside of you that spurred you, that like ended up spurring action?
Mm-hmm. 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 I mean, first, I was gonna say that you're right. We get to that Maslow's hierarchy where we're safe. We get the 60, 70, whatever the comfort zone is for us, and because we don't have any vision for the future, then we start drowning ourselves either in more work, like you said. It's like I don't know what else I can do, so I'm just gonna work more. Or, you start watching every football game that's on TV and play the uh, lottery. I don't know what, there's another fantasy football, and you get into the all 82 games of basketball and all of these things. So you're just get to the point where you're comfortable and you get buried into all these busy work that are not meaningful, and they're just slowly chipping at you. But to me, I do think that this is where a lot of people fall into, and that is the worst place to be, where you're comfortable but not enough to tilt you over to do something about it. And I can tell you that I stayed there for 2 years, and I was asking, like, seriously, is there more? Can I do anything else? And I hear people talking about, oh, passion. You got to follow your passion. You got to find your passion, what you're passionate about. That will give you fulfillment. And I'm looking under the rock. I'm looking at the bottom of the ocean. I'm trying to find this passion, and I can't find it anywhere, right? Because you don't find your passion. I learned after a while, you have to build your passion, right? The passion is not in the bottoms of the sea, but it's in the bottom of your heart. That's a different discussion. But
is it? That's a good one. Sorry, go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, you're keep right. Yeah, what happened is I was stewing so much in that wonderment if there's something else, that I didn't know what it was. And luckily for me, my wife saw me brewing, and you don't know what it is, right? And you feel like you know everything and you don't need the help. And especially when it comes to someone so close, you're very reluctant to take any kind of advice. But my wife just nudged me at one point and like, hey, listen to this personal development podcast. There's a motivational speaker, Les Brown and Lewis House, that are talking. And, it was just that little spark. That little spark was there. And I started jumping to another podcast where they talked about the notion of, pulling it back to what we were talking about at the beginning, mindset. And that's where I started reading the book Mindset, and all of a sudden the heavens open, the choir started singing, and it just blew my mind to realize that if I want to dream something else, I can dream and achieve it. And this is one point that I was going to make is, we all have certain seasons in our lives, right? You had your season where you were in the army and you were grinding hard. And that's okay. We all have those type of seasons. I was working to fulfill my American dream, and that's okay. Up until a point when you feel that uneasiness, that's when you have to wonder what else is there and what is the next season in my life. And that's where I started with the mindset. It's trying to open up the possibilities of something different, where I didn't even know there was anything different, right? And that's how I started.
It's so tangible. So the crazy part is, I guess a lot of people have that kind of experience that you had, right? And they will get to that point, they're comfortable, but they start to get a little bit uneasy. Maybe they've watched their 7th season of the NFL and they've done their fantasy league, and they're even in those comfortable stacks that keep building up higher. They're starting to say, what am I really getting from this? Like, it's just so much time invested, and I just don't feel anything, and so they might hear an inspirational podcast. They might hear an inspirational message. Tony Robbins might make their way through their, YouTube feed, or, and Les Brown. Oh my gosh, what a man. But so they might get these injections, and they get this feeling, this like dopamine hit of like dopamine is one of the most misunderstood chemicals, I think, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm,
And people are
mm-hmm,
like, oh, it's a feel good chemical. I'm like, yeah, it does make you feel good. And people say, oh, it's a reward mechanism. Like,
mm-hmm,
we're getting further from the truth. It's what it really is. It's like it's like a hope chemical. It's
mm-hmm,
it's the idea, it's an anticipation
mm-hmm,
signal. That's why slot machines work. That's why gambling works, because it hits your dopamine receptors. It's not I won, I got a
mm-hmm,
dopamine hit. It's that I might win,
mm-hmm.
and every once in a while I do win. And when I do win, it's unexpected. Thing that people don't realize, the most powerful dopamine hits come from unexpected positive events. So if you
Mm-hmm.
like went out for a run right now, you're like, oh, I feel good. Like I have the endorphins kicking in, like I'm getting maybe a runner's high. I'm feeling really good. And I feel good because I'm doing something that's positive for my body and all this. But if while you're on a run, you happen to run into a really good old friend who's also running that you haven't seen in like 3, 4 years, you go, holy smokes, this is incredible. And that dopamine hits like boom through the roof because it was unexpected and it was positive. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's very important to consider when you're thinking about this kind of stuff, when you're thinking about like how do I structure something in such a way that is uh how do I build systems that encourage the growth. And I think where I was originally thinking about this is that when people listen to a Les Brown or they listen to a Tony Robbins,
Right.
they'll get that dopamine hit because they have like, one, I didn't expect to feel this way from this talk.
Mm-hmm.
Like, holy smokes, that's awesome. And you have this idea of this anticipation of what the future could possibly hold for you. But what I think more people fall into is that they go back to the same well for that next dopamine hit. So instead of
Mm-hmm.
taking the principles of what they listen to and putting them into action and seeing that turn into something, they
Mm-hmm.
listen to another video,
Correct.
which for people like me who make videos is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But for the actual end use, the person who's listening, who's like taking in this
Mm-hmm.
information that needs to take action in their life to live a way that few other people live by by taking this action, they have to take that action. And
Mm-hmm.
so you have given like keynote speeches since then, like in front of like hundreds of people, like you took real action. So you went from achieving the American dream, which is no small task,
Mm-hmm.
but the system's built for it, to pushing out of that system, from getting those exogenous, you know, uh inserts of motivation from the podcast, from these points, from
Mm-hmm.
reading the books. So how did you get from, like, take me on the journey with you from Les Brown to
Yeah.
you on stage?
Yeah, that's a really good point, right? Because we do fall into this trap where we search for that dopamine, and my mentor called it spiritual entertainment, where we hear motivational speech and we're like, yeah, this is so exciting. I'm gonna definitely do this tomorrow,
It's the most
until I listen
dangerous
to
word
another clip.
ever.
Right. Yes, and it's true. And it's funny you say that, because that's exactly what happened. Now that I think about it, I I started listening to these ideas of a growth mindset, of the possibilities that I can do, that it really allowed me to dream for myself, to the possibilities of what could be other things that I can foresee for myself in the future, not living the American dream, but having a new dream for myself that next season. And I did stay in that state for some time. I was contemplating, I was brewing on it. And I do feel like this is kind of there's certain stages in change where at first you don't know that you want to change, then you kind of realize that you want to change, then you're thinking about how can I change, and then you start to make a plan, and after that you actually take action on that plan. So I brewed into those stages for some time, and I remember going to a Tony Robbins event. It was a 4-hour quick event, and it was fascinating too, because we were there since 5 o'clock in the morning. Tony wasn't speaking. There were a lot of other speakers. He was just closing out the event. It's 4 o'clock at this point. We've went through all these different trainings and sales pitches and all of this. We were exhausted, and Tony comes on, and the energy is just amazing, right? He has this way of making you feel just so energized, makes you dance and all that stuff. But he did point out exactly what you were saying, is like a dream without a plan is just a dream, right? There's nothing there. It's just, you're just dreaming about something. It's not going to manifest unless you put a plan together. And I took a paper and a pen, and I just wrote down, in this amount of time, I want to do this. In this amount of time, I want to do this. In this amount of time. It was a simple draft of no longer a dream, but some goals. And that's when I started thinking, okay, now it's no longer a dream, it's a plan. What do I do? Right? And we can talk about how to plan your future rather than dream of your future.
Yeah, it's huge. It's one of the things that I've facilitated in in the goal setting workshops that I've done, is using SMART goals, right? And it's something that people hear and like, oh gosh, here we go, SMART goals again.
Yes.
But God, there's a reason that it's stuck around, and people always want to do their little spin, like, oh, you make your goals smarter, and so they add an ER. Like, listen, guys, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. There's no reason to want to throw your own little spicy flavor onto everything. Sometimes, and honestly, because I think what people in my position and in your position, where we're in the business of helping people, we can get lost and a little bit blinded by ourselves, by wanting to insert ourselves into the process. This is why I love the word facilitate. Me facilitating a goal setting workshop means that the process here is between that person who's attending and their desired future. That's what's going on. I'm merely facilitating the process. So I want to give you honestly, like the most simple, not the easiest, but the most simple recipe that it takes to get from here to there. And you laid out a huge, probably, if you weren't going to do any other part of a SMART goal, you have to do what you just said you did. And that is, you use time, you use T to create time to create the deadline. You say, I'm going to do this by that date. Take out all the rest of it. If you're going to take away one thing, give yourself a deadline. You have to have, that's what that single piece alone is what takes it from being a dream and turns it into a plan. Because exactly like you said, once you have a date, you say, your brain automatically has to break this down into subtasks. I can't just say, I want to speak on stage and deliver a powerful message that's going to change people's lives in 2 months. That's my timeline. And you can't just say, okay, cool, I'm going to go do that. You have to say, what has to happen for me to get from where I'm at to there? It's not, I'm not stepping up one step. How many steps are there? Like, what do I need? Okay. Well, then you have to do your research, right? You have to figure, well, what do speakers have? Okay. They don't have degrees necessarily. Okay. I don't have to go to college to get a degree. That's cool. But they have some sort of life experience that they're able to share. Do I have life experience? So there's a lot of introspection that's involved. So when you talk about creating a plan, I'm curious, um, how do you structure your dreams? I like that
Mhm.
idea. I like the idea of, because goals feels like it's used all the time. A structured dream, I just like that just came into my head, and I like it. I'm gonna use that probably for a good long while now. Thank you.
Yeah, I actually like also vision,
Yes.
a vision.
Yes.
And I have I put together just for myself as well as for other people if they're interested. I call it the four pillars of actualizing your dream. And one is perception, and that's more about self-awareness. The second one is planning, which is the topic that we're talking about now. Progress is necessary as the third pillar, and then perspective, which is mindset. Even though I put it at the last, is kind of interleaved with everything else. And I did forget to mention that the first one, the P of the perception, is our self-awareness. That self-awareness happened when I was talking about change, because a lot of times we don't know what we want, and that's why we drown ourselves with all these distractions, and we just numb ourselves, right? Rather than thinking about it, we're too busy, right? You've heard people say, when you're talking about waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, someone would tell me, oh, I don't have time for that, I'm so busy. But if you would have something meaningful that you want to do, you would be able to carve out of your time an hour or two to do the things that are meaningful to you. But because there's no awareness of what to do, then people just drown out their time with busy work. And busy work is not meaningful work. Like I heard someone say that, right? And I'm gonna say that how you become more self-aware is eliminating what I've had at the beginning of my journey, is having all these external factors tell me what to do. You have your parents, you have your society, all of these telling you, oh, this is the American dream, follow this. And that was fine for that season of my life. But then the next season, where you do the things that you want to do, you achieve your dream, that no longer requires an external look, it requires an internal look, right? You don't look at the bottom of the ocean. I told you that. I seem to like it. You look at the bottom of your heart, and that's when you start asking yourself, what is the thing that I like? What are the things that are exciting to me? What are the things that I could do that I feel lost in time? Things that give me energy rather than drain energy. And those are the things that I had to figure out in that brewing session, where I was wondering, what can I do for myself? What would be that dream, right? And that took a while, until from the moment I heard Les Brown until the moment I was with Tony Robbins. It was that self-discovery, self-awareness chance to dig deep and kind of realize what are things that are interesting. Right? There's and nothing, you don't come out of the womb running, right? You first have to learn how to walk, and you have to crawl. So the first things that you do is like, oh, I like playing the piano, but I'm no good at it. Okay, practice, see if you like it. If you get immersed and you enjoy it, and you're no longer you're just think that it's cool, you actually find it fascinating, you will get lost in time. That's when I was mentioning that I've turned a curiosity into building a passion. And that's how I was able to conjure a dream for myself of becoming a motivational professional speaker through those steps. I don't know
It's
if you
an
want to add something
interesting,
to that.
yeah, it's oh, it's so interesting. I feel like it's a testament to our time that that first step has to exist. But it's also a testament, and by that I mean we have to spend time to figure out what it is that we're passionate about. To me,
Mm-hmm.
that's crazy. But there was a time when I had that, you know, or I guess really, I never really had a time like that as much as my passions were usurped by other shadow. I listened to a book called War of Art, and he talks about like shadow professions,
Mm-hmm.
being a shadow pro, and that's so my military career was a shadow profession. It gave me the things that I wanted to achieve in my life through a different means,
Mm-hmm.
and that weren't fulfilling in the way that pursuing my real passions would be. So I got to experience what it was like to be in a highly respected profession, to be respected as a expert and a professional in my field, to feel like, you know, like a man, you know, to feel like
Mm-hmm.
a strong masculine role associated with being in the military. But I was talking, I had a couple podcasts ago, I had a wonderful, wonderful woman. Her name was Cherie on, and she talked about she has coaching clients. So she coaches like women on vision, exactly like you were talking about, on
Mm-hmm.
vision, on clarity, on purpose. You know, and she was talking to this one lady where Cherie told me she was like, I was lost. Like I don't know how I can help her because she's Cherie's specialty was getting perfect clarity on your purpose and vision.
Mm-hmm.
This person that she was helping, she was saying, she was like, you know, what is it that you want? Cherie was asking her, like, what is it that you wanted? Like, what are you passionate about? And she was like, you know, like nothing really, you know, I just kind of want something more, you know, than life. She's like, oh, okay. She's like, well, what do you do? She was asking like the same question, the powerful questions, like, what do you do that you get lost in time? Like, that's such a
Mm-hmm.
powerful question and such a good litmus test for what is it that you truly love. Um, and she was like, you know, like, I don't know. I watch a lot of Netflix, you know, and it's just like I like shows and stuff like that. And
Mm-hmm.
Cherie said, she's like, I'm not the one. I'm not the one to help you. Like, if you have nothing, if you're so comfortable and you obviously don't have that sense of, she has enough uneasiness to pursue coaching, which is a
Mm-hmm.
huge positive sign. But she was so lost in the world of, I think, like we were talking about, in that world of that's secured up by like the American dream, where you have the walls built up, and within those walls, you start to accrue a bunch of different comfort things. Like I've got my Netflix account, and I've got food coming in, I've got my ice cream, and I've, you know, whatever. Like I've got my friends that we drink wine and we talk about this show about, you know, and we laugh and we have fun. And you get so lost in there that you don't know who you are
Mm-hmm.
anymore. Like what drives you? That's
Mm-hmm.
such a difficult thing. And I think one of the things that one practice, I'm curious about your thoughts on this. One practice that is the single most simple and the single most difficult practice that you can do that's going to answer this question is silence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Spend time with yourself with zero distractions, with nothing around you. No, exactly like you said, eliminating external input. Like
Mm-hmm.
that was so huge when you mentioned that, when you're talking about becoming more self-aware and having that as a tool. You have to eliminate those, but you have to eliminate even the fun ones, not even the ones that are trying
Mm-hmm.
to influence your future. I mean, really all of them are.
Mm-hmm.
Like as we've learned with what social media does,
Right.
they are geared towards changing your future into scroll, watch, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to take control of that. And it is damn scary. It is so scary to sit with yourself. And it is, even for me, sometimes I was doing this last night. So I'm blessed enough that my wife has a 3-person indoor sauna that she had bought from a
Mm-hmm.
previous homeowner that we've brought with us wherever we went. And so I get the sauna at home, which is amazing.
Nice.
But last night I was in the sauna it's an infrared, so the temperature is really low, so I stay in there for a very long time. I'm in there for like an hour, but it only
Well,
gets to like 140, so it's
mhm,
not, you're not cranking super high heats. But what I like to do is I like to do breath work in there. But I'll
mhm,
start it out. I'll give myself, I play it easy. So like the first 30 minutes, I'll have like a book that I'm listening to or something like that. And so I have input and I'm like get to think and like do business focused stuff or like self-development stuff. And then the last 30 minutes I do breath work and no input. I turn off all the lights.
yep.
I'm in completely like, removing as many sensory inputs as possible.
Mhm,
And even last, it's the first time I've done this in a while. Last night I was doing it and was kept getting so uncomfortable in the silence, like to the point where like I would move my body just to like, oh, I'm going to move this way. Oh, I'm uncomfortable here. And this is the conversation I'm allowing to happen in my head,
mhm,
you know? And it's just like, we have to, if you want to proceed forward, you have to get
mhm,
to know yourself. If you don't know, if you can't answer, if you can't like embrace that first step that you talked about, the
mhm,
perception pillar,
mhm.
you've you got to do something. And to
Yep.
me, like it might be a bridge too far for people, but I think that silence is well, how what other techniques are like, what have you found to be powerful in like kicking this off? If you want to get somebody on this path, you got to get them in step one. What have
Yeah.
you found that be effective in that first pillar?
And you're right. Meditation is very useful. Just being quiet with yourself is very helpful to clear. Well, you get all these different thoughts that are just racing at you, but the more you do it, you'll be able to clear your thoughts and just pay attention to your thoughts, and that way it feels like there's, it's a tangled web, and by the time you're in it just straightens it out, right? And meditation is really good. um, and I think for a lot of people, especially if they're at the beginning of their journey, this staying, like you said, even for 5 minutes gets very uncomfortable. The the one thing that I would recommend to anybody is journaling. And I have to admit that I don't do it as often because my drug of choice is meditation. But journaling is when you're asking your subconscious a question, it cannot resist not answering. So if I were to ask you, what is your favorite food? You all of a sudden you have to think. Your brain just goes into automatic answer mode. So if you're sitting there with a journal and you ask yourself, what would I like for myself to do? What would be something that would make me feel energized? Right. I actually heard, and I remembered today on a podcast doing that obituary exercise, finding yourself, imagining yourself at your funeral, and what would people tell, the stories about you. That's also a very powerful one. That works wonders because again, it functions both ways, right? You're writing down, so you're asking your brain, just like journaling, and then you're also thinking from other people's perspective of how they see you and how you want to be seen. That's very good. And the last one that I find helpful, and I do it every week, is I go in nature. I go in nature, no music, no distraction, no nothing. Just being in nature is very helpful for your brain, because what happens is you see this immensity of whatever it is and you realize how tiny you are in this world, and that kind of puts things in perspective, and you're like, well, you always think that you're the most important person in this world, but when you're in nature and you sit there and you look in awe at trees that have been there for hundreds of years or rocks that have been millions of years, you all of a sudden realize, my life is kind of limited on this planet, so why don't I figure out something that I would like to do, that I would enjoy doing? Now, those were just a slew of things that I know I've incorporated in my life. I actually sat down and asked myself, what would I want my future to be in 10, 20, 30 years?
I think having that focus, having a guided question like that and having a practice like the funeral, like the obituary exercise,
Mhm.
I think is huge, especially when you go out, even if you don't have, if you're not at some point like specifically stating that question, but you have the spirit, the energy of it, where that question's kind of
Mhm.
just reverberating in the back of your brain.
Mhm.
When you go out and do things like that, like I would parse my silent time ever so slightly from a meditation practice,
Mhm.
because I don't I think meditation is super powerful and super important. Obviously, I think that being silent is helpful, and that's a form of meditation. I think that for this, having not trying to clear your mind, I think that's where a lot of people get kind of turned off with meditation. Maybe a lot of people have probably tried it and they sit
Mhm.
down for a minute and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I just can't. I'm losing at meditation because I keep having thoughts." Like, one, that's not how meditation works.
Right.
Meditation is not say don't think. It's like the thought comes up and you let it go. The
Mhm.
thought comes up and you're like, "Oh, it's the most powerful tool that I found for myself when it comes to meditation is like, oh, that's interesting." And so
Mhm.
what I'll do is I have that comment that I use in my head for my own thought. I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting that thought, that I'm
Mhm.
having that thought right now."
That's
And
really
but then
good.
I don't ask a question like, "I wonder why." Nope, don't get to ask that question. Like, so
Right, right.
I just say, "Oh, that's interesting," and then I let it go and I bring my focus and attention back to my breath. And so for
Mhm.
this perception exercise, I would say don't meditate with breath focus, and don't meditate with a the goal of clearing your brain. Have it
Mhm.
with a goal of answering one question. And don't even have, I would say, veer away from the word answer. I'd say like ponder.
Mhm. Mhm.
Ponder what you want your life to look like. What is it that you want people to think about you when your life is done? When you are writing down your list of accomplishments, what is it that you want to have accomplished? What is it that matters to you?
Yeah.
You know, how, what kind of change do you want to be a part of in the world? And just ponder those thoughts. And then your brain, just like in meditation, is going to wander.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then
Mhm.
you just bring it back to that central focus. Make the central focus that thought, and just bring it back, like ponder, like, "Oh, what would my life look like? Oh, I'm old and gray and bald in a casket,
Mhm.
you know, and people are standing up to talk and they're in tears thinking about my memory because I did this, because I made them
Mhm.
feel, maybe it's I made them feel really important." Like, "Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting
Mhm.
that that matters to me, that me making somebody else feel important. I wonder what that would look like in action." You know, and then you get to play with that and work it on down.
Yes. That's well explained. Yes.
And with
Exactly.
nature, I love the stars. Like, it
Mhm.
matters so much to me, and for that same exact thing, for the immensity of it,
Mhm.
and realizing how small of a speck you are. When you think, like, I just had this, we were watching for asteroids the other night, and because there was a meteor shower, it was a couple weeks ago. There was a meteor shower, and we saw three meteors like
Oh,
within
that's
the sky.
cool.
Super cool. And I had this thought when I was out there, when we were waiting for them to show up. We were out there for like half an hour before we saw one, and I put my perception as that of a star, like
Mhm.
being in the cold abyss of nothingness,
Mhm.
burning white hot, emanating light from light years away, you know, and just, but like this desolate aloneness and this vastness of space, not in any sort
Mhm.
of negative way, just in like a pure factual, this is where it's at, and realizing like where that is. And I got so overwhelmed with like, holy shit, like
Mhm.
this, whoa, like everything's so big, like that's
Right.
happening right now. I'm not even making it up. Like, that there's a
Mhm.
gas ball burning on fire out there right now.
Yeah.
That's and it's just like, my perspective just on like my existence was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, and for this same principle, I think it has a lot of validity for people who are struggling with any kind of issues. When there's some struggle and there's some in some situation, I do this too, where we're so into the problem that we can't see past it. But if we were to take a step back and look at it like, is this really a big deal? 1 year, 2 year, 5 years from now, that grand point of view, is this really a big deal in this immensity of the universe that we're at? And when you're taking that step back, it really helps you kind of put things in perspective, even when
That's
you're having issues,
huge.
right?
That's
Yeah.
so it's so true when you take the perspective of time. Like
Mm-hmm.
and it's the way I think a tactical tool with this is to look back. Like I think about when I'm telling stories with friends or whatever, and we're referencing back, like, dude, I don't even remember. I remember getting into a fight with this person. I don't even remember what it's about. And then
Right.
using those kind of it works really well for me because for a lot of things, my memory's terrible. so it's a
Yep.
great tool that I can use to think about the present. Like, am I gonna like I'm taking this very seriously right now. Am I even going to remember this in a week?
Right.
And then you put in, like you said, the perspective of 2 years from now, what am I going to remember? What
Mm-hmm.
can I do right now? Take that and turn it into a positive action. What can I do today that I'm going to have? Oh my gosh, dude, I remember on December 5th when I was sitting there and I just decided out of nowhere to get up and go for a walk. I was listening to this podcast and I was like, I'm just going to get up and go for a walk. Like, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to go into nature. And I remember like I stopped. I had meetings scheduled and I didn't even do them. Like I canceled everything and I just went out to go for a nature walk. Like, what can you do right now that would benefit you? That would you would recall with the greatest like vivid memory in 5 years from now?
Mm-hmm.
And how does that play into the planning and all of that? Man, I don't want to go. I know we are scheduled to stop now. How much do you have any time?
Yeah, let's continue. Yeah,
Uh,
it's fine.
okay, okay.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, we haven't got to the planning yet.
yeah, exactly, exactly. I didn't know if you wanted to go through all of them. It's fine at any rate, but by all means, let's go. Let's dive into planning. So
Yeah.
we've done the first step, right? We've looked at the first pillar. We've really broken down perception and self-awareness and
Mm-hmm.
the tools you gave amazing practical tools of and practices that you can do right now to become aware of what it is that drives you and what you're passionate about. So
Mm-hmm.
now we have this idea. We have our passion. How do we not let this wither and die on the vine with all the other passions that have come and gone that we never followed through with?
Right. And that's a good setup. It's a good setup because yes, you do need a plan, right? And I think you said it too, right? You're here and then you want to get here. And between these 2 points, there's a huge gap. And in this gap, there has to be a plan. Otherwise, it's just a dream. And it makes me always think about New Year resolutions. Everybody wants to lose weight this next year, but then what are you doing, right? Like by the first month is this much weight, by the second month is this much weight, right? You have to plan it out. And the way I was able to even plan my desire to become a professional speaker is I want to speak on 10,000 in front of 10,000 people. That's an audacious goal. Okay. So how can I cut that in half? Well, I might be speaking in, I don't know, in 10 years, I would speak in front of 10,000. In 5 years, I would speak in front of 1,000, let's say, right? That means that in a year would be how many, right? And you parse this big audacious goal into more measurable things, right? And I like to say that you take it from the macro level and you cut it down, and then you go from the micro level. What are the things that you can do tomorrow, next week, next month, to make sure that you achieve those milestones that you set from the macro level. And I can tell you a simple example. And I'm horrible at social media, getting better at it. But I set a goal for myself when I started to be like, I want to have in the next 3 months 10,000 followers. Right. And then I said, well, that means that I need to cut it in half. It's going to be 5,000 followers. Okay. And that means that in a week, I would be having 300 followers or whatever the math comes out to be. And then as I worked my way through the micro planning, I realized that's not going to work. They're not that excited to hear me talk yet. However, so that's where the strategy is the logical things come into play, where you have a macro, you have a micro, and you do a top down and a bottom up approach, and then you marry the macro and the micro, and if they match up, then you're good. And then you solidify your plan, and you don't look at the big mountain, when you look at the scary audacious goal, that's a little bit frightening. Our amygdala, the fight or flight, is just like, no, I can't do that. But how do you eat an elephant, right? You look at the first few meals in the day. That's how you eat it. So set the plan and then go at the micro. What can you do? And the other thing is, a lot of people get discouraged, right? Because they set a goal to lose however many pounds, and then they don't achieve it. This plan is not set in stone. You execute, you learn from it, you assess, you rewrite, and restart. You constantly update it as you go, because it's never going to be perfect. And those are the steps that I'm applying them in my own life, right? This year I wanted to achieve so much. I've achieved a lot, but not as much as I thought I was going to do. But I'm reassessing and adjusting and recalibrating and restarting.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really important is to find ways to measure what it is that you're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're creating the sub goals, right, you have your big end state that you want to live in, and then you create, right, those benchmarks to achieve along the way. All of them are specific, right? As part of the SMART goals being specific. The next one is measurable, and so you want to make sure that you're like, okay, well, if I wanted 3,000 subscribers by the end of this year, then like you said, you break it down quarterly, you break it down monthly, and you can look at, okay, well, at what point in the planning did I insert the conscious time, which actually might be your next step in the progress, is to do in progress reviews. So I think like you were saying, even perspective, the fourth pillar, it kind of gets intertwined in. It feels like all of these, like we're linear thinkers. We want to think in a straight line, a path ahead. I do this step, then this step, then this step. Now the first two, you got to understand what it is that you want, and you got to make a plan, right? Once those are done, then everything kind of works together. Then even the perception is still working. It's not like you're done thinking, just like you said. I think also the last thing I'll say before I let you proceed is that I think we sometimes get mixed up between the measurement and the goal. And I think that this is most clearly done around New Year's, around physical wellness. Is that very rarely do you hear someone say, I want to increase my physical wellness. One, that's not as too general of a goal. You need to be more specific. And so when people think about being specific in physical fitness, physical wellness, whatever you want to call it, they go to weight. They go to this one measurement and they call that a goal. That's not a goal. That is one measurement of many to look at the whole picture of your physical fitness. Like, maybe you want to be capable of doing something. Maybe it's my goal is to run a marathon. My goal is to do a Tough Mudder, whatever that is. And then like, man, it sure would be easier if I did that if I was 30 pounds lighter, so that's something that I'm doing that helps me get to that goal. But there's, I think that's why two things. I think that is one of the reasons why we fail to get to the goal, because the goal isn't structured right. We're looking at a measurement instead of a purpose. And then we have this tendency to like, and that's why it's hard for people to maintain that weight loss, because once they hit that goal, the goal's hit. It's done. Like, I've done it. Like, what am I going to do? Lose 20 more pounds? Then I'm going to be underweight. Like I wasn't, whatever it is, like you can't exceed that. And so one of the analogies that I've always liked to use with this is when you're thinking about your goals and you're thinking about like that purpose and getting to the mountaintop, stop thinking of the mountaintop, think of the mountain range. Like, I have this goal at the top of this mountain, but when I'm up there, I'm looking across at like, look at that mountaintop. That's what I want next. Look at that one. I want to do that too at the same time. Maybe I want to learn guitar and run a marathon. And so you have these things. And one of the best tips that I heard when it comes to this is that you should never be in between goals. This is where the mountain analogy goes out the window. Like, you should never be descending down a mountain ever. It should be, I've hit a spot. If I'm trying to make this analogy work, I've hit a spot in the mountain where like, this is where I want to go for this goal. But like, before the mountain's just not going to work. Before you should already be. So let's say you're writing a book. Let's get real tangible. If you're writing a book and you're getting close, like you're trying to figure out how to wrap this story up in a nice, neat bow at the end, or maybe the last thing you're doing is the first chapter, however you want to do it. You're working on that very last piece. When you're starting to work on that last piece, you should start writing your next book. Like, you should start working on the outline for the next one. There shouldn't be a gap in between, because that gap opens up all of the fears, all of the concerns. Like, it's like this wide opening where you're not pursuing something, and so you're vulnerable. Like, don't let yourself become vulnerable. Protect yourself, insulate yourself from that by stacking your goals with the next thing that you're going to do, and never stop.
Yeah. It's a good segue to the idea of progress, because one thing you were saying, and it made me think, Nelson Mandela, I believe he said that when we get to the top of the hill, the one thing we notice is that there's another hill. And that's true. And you might have a goal for today, for the next whatever it is, but we as human creatures, we just love growth. We yearn progress. And this whatever season you're in your life, and you're sunsetting it and you're looking for the next one, there's always going to be a next one. Because if you look at it 10 years increments, right? Whatever you were excited about at 20, I'm pretty sure you weren't excited about it at 30. And say for 40s and 50s, there's different seasons. So there's always going to be the next mountain that you want to conquer. And I agree with you on that idea that if you're not continuously progressing, you end up regressing. It's you gotta keep going. And the one thing that you've said well, and I want to double down on it, is the notion of measuring. Because if you're not measuring what you're doing, then you don't know, right? I'm thinking about going to the gym, and I know that I have an app and I put in all my reps, and whenever I open up the app and I see this is how much I've done last time, this much weight, this many reps, I know that if I put an extra pound there, I'll get that feel good feeling that I am progressing, that I am making strides. And I'm measuring things. And the more you measure, the more you get excited about your goal, the more you realize that, oh, I'm actually making progress. And you get that drive and that desire to continue going. But, if you're kind of saying, well, I want to lose some weight. And then you're like, well, I don't know how much, but this week I'll just eat some French fries because I feel like I'm losing some weight, but I don't know for sure. Gotta measure what matters. So it's the progress is necessary, right? Because the where you are and where you want to be, there's a gap, and that gap is a continuous progress. There's growth there. And when you're making progress, you're definitely enjoying that reward of knowing that you are growing. And I'm with you. If you stop growing, the default is to pull back into your comfort zone and just find the busy work to just keep you in that numb state.
We're constantly fighting in the attention war. That is the war of our time, with everything demanding our attention, from streaming services to internet to social media. Everything is understanding the value of your attention. And so if everybody thinks that your attention is really valuable, you should think the same thing about your own attention, and put intention behind your attention. Like you, and that's your process. It's all intentionality. It's all not letting life happen to you. It's you happening to your life. Like you are the thing. Like life is now in the passenger seat and you took the wheel back. That's what this process does. This is incredible. This is really, really, really good stuff. So continue. Let's hit it. Give us numero cuatro, baby.
Let's go to, well, and this is the bread and butter, right? The mindset is necessary to be able to go from here to there, to achieve from where you want to be, because that was my main struggle. And goes back to when I finally decided to change, to do something different, to follow my dream, not the American dream. And this is where the book Mindset was so instrumental, because up until that point, the only thing that I thought that I could do is what others laid out for me to do. It was that's how much my mind comprehended at that point. And I read the book Mindset, and it tells me that on a long enough timeline, with enough effort, dedication, and drive, I can do anything. And we have this growth mindset in so many areas of our lives, but in others, we have fixed mindset. It is just so baffling to me. And for me, in certain skills, I didn't think I had them. And it was the pivotal moment that got me on the journey, just that mindset shift.
And so how do you do that? How do you shift your mindset? Like, we're taking the intentionality, right? And we're becoming self-aware, and we're eliminating those external inputs, and we're getting clear on that. But I guess my question is, how do we build the mindset that is resilient to obstacles when they're coming up in this path? Like, in the beginning, we're going to start off great. This is what happens to me. Like when I start a new workout regimen, we're like, I'm going to try something different with working out. I'm going to do this, this, and this. For the first week, incredible. Second week, even better. And third week, I'm starting to see results. And I'm like, holy smokes, this is awesome. Nothing in the world would stop me from doing this, because I feel great. I'm starting to look great. Why would I ever stop doing this? And then life happens. Something happens where my schedule gets interrupted. I miss a day of working out. And that missing that one day opens up the possibility in my head that you can miss a day. And then from going 3 weeks without
Mhm.
missing a day, within the next 3 weeks, I will have missed like an entire week aggregated.
Mhm.
And then that
Mhm.
keeps building. That's like, it's like compounding negative interest against
Mhm.
myself once that door is open. And so how do you build a resilient mindset that accounts for you're gonna mess up?
Mhm.
Things aren't, it's this growth and development, self-development isn't this. It's not that. That's not the trajectory. It's whoa, like it's all over the place. It's up, it's
Right.
down, it's sideways. It's sitting still sometimes.
Mhm.
So what kind of tools, what kind of practices, what how do you maintain this over time? Because our goals, like we talked about, there's a gap. We're here, goals here. We
Mhm.
got a bunch of stuff to do. And so how do we keep that motivation up? How do we adopt that mindset?
Yeah, there's the second and third steps. The two pillars are very important because when you have a P in place, you have a plan, and you know that you're making progress, and then you're reassessing. That's always helpful because what the plan does also is a I don't know if you've experienced this, where it's Monday and you're going to the gym and you're like, waking up, I don't know what I want to do. Do I do legs today? I don't want to do legs. I don't know. Maybe no, I'm just going to stay home. When you have a plan in place, you're that cognitive load, that mental fatigue is no longer there. So you're already on your way. And with the progress, like you said, you get that feel good emotion, like, oh yes, I've done it. But then you also have to realize that you are the that's where a growth mindset comes into play. You're It's not a linear thing. You're gonna fail, and it's inevitable. And life happens. I agree. There's so many things, but what we must not do is fall into this trap that you were saying, that all of a sudden you're skipping one day and you're 2 and 3 and 4, and that's where the plan comes into play. And what I do is every week I have to reassess my plan. Like on a Sunday, for me, it's reflection time. I I look at it, I'm like, okay, this week it didn't go according to plan. Let me readjust and I'll start again. But you have to be consistent because otherwise if you're not making progress, you're gonna regress. And having that mindset that failure is gonna happen and it's inevitable. But when those time comes, you just have to reassess.
That's beautiful. I think I was reading a book. They were talking, it might have been a Malcolm Gladwell book. Oh no, it wasn't. It was Angela Duckworth. She wrote a
Great.
book called Grit. Did you just
Yep.
say Grit? You know it.
Yep. Yep.
It's such a good book. She talks about Michael Phelps.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she talks about how he mentally trained for adversity in the pool. And you think, what adversity in the pool? He's swimming all the time. Like the adversity is the muscular endurance and required to sustain energy for the whole thing. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like the turns, right? Having the proper form on turns. But what else is it? One of the things that they said, which was so powerful, was uh he planned for um what not if, but when he would do a flip and one goggle
Mm-hmm.
would flip and then water would dump into his eye and he'd have to swim blind. He's like, and just the simple, it's not, I don't think that he ever trained physically this way. I don't think he ever trained swimming without goggles or with water in his eyes or one flip. Like I don't think he actually executed training that way. I think he had to do that in a competition,
Yeah,
but
he won a
the
medal. He
right.
won a medal. Yeah.
And the difference was, all the difference was, is that he thought about it. Is that he
Mm.
thought about, when I flip, my goggles might flip over. And if they
Mm.
flip over, this is how I'm going to handle it. And so he addressed the elephant in the room, like the thing that we're all kind of really scared of doing. Like when we create a plan
Mhm.
and we're checking progress and like things are going well. We're moving and we're moving and we're moving, and we focus on the progress, and we're like, oh, look at this, we're doing great. And then instead of doing in progress reviews, genuine ones, we're looking at the wins. Like, oh, look, I did 5 social media posts this week. I did I did 25 cold calls. I did whatever, it is for you. I painted for 17 hours, but you're not looking at, oh, I ate 2 pieces of cheesecake on Tuesday. You know what I mean? Like, you're kind of leaving out the negative, and then
Mhm.
and you're allowing that door to be open, but you're also not, you're doing that because you're scared of it. You're scared of
Mhm.
addressing it. And it's because you're scared of addressing it because you didn't address it beforehand. You didn't say, when Tuesday comes around and my husband brings home that cheesecake, or my wife brings home whatever, that carrot cake, and when they bring it home, this is what I'm going to do. Like, it's
Mhm.
exactly like you said. So it's planning. It's in that planning phase, but it's planning for that adversity. It's not
Mhm.
just saying, I'm going to accomplish this. It's saying that when I don't, or when this thing comes up to block me, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
whatever the case
That's
is.
really good.
So I
That's
think
really
that's, yeah, holy smokes, man. Dude, we could do this for
I
hours,
know.
hours.
We barely scratched the surface of the power of mind growth mindset.
We did, but I think that we really built a strong foundation to build upon it, and somewhere for people to start. And so, what I where can people, if people wanted to learn more about these, if they wanted to like, can they, do you have an ability for people to like work with you, or do you have any sort of like events that are coming up, or is there, how can people follow you, be engaged with you, and learn more about these pillars? Do they need to buy a ticket for your next talk, or
They can easily go to my website is road number 2 H and F HF, actually no N, road to HF, which stands for road to happiness and fulfillment. Is, I always consider that we're never going to finish. It takes a lifetime to learn how to live, and I think we're all on this journey. So that's why I figured it makes sense for my website to be called the road to happiness and fulfillment. They can follow me on social media, and if anybody wants the 4 pillars that we talked about, I do have a PDF on my website. It's going to be a pop-up that they put in their information, and they're going to get the bulk of what we talked about with actions and description of the 4 pillars. Road to H and HF.com.
perfect,
And
perfect,
I'll send it to you too, so you can put it on your
please.
link. Yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
absolutely. Actually, so here, I'm going to try this out. This is the first time that I'm ever going to do this. Check this out. If you want the 4 pillars to happiness and fulfillment, click here.
Oh,
Now I have to
very,
follow through and make sure I actually do it.
very good. Yeah, that's awesome.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you. Holy smokes, this was so good. I hope that we can do it again and we can really dive in a bit further. And I
Right.
can't, and I just, I'm so excited for your road, for your
Mhm.
path and your journey. Like, I want to, once you have that room, this is the ask that I'll make of you. Once you make that talk where you have 1,000 people in the room, let's hop back on. Let's do this again.
That's awesome.
And then
Yeah.
that way we can share with people your journey, how you implemented these 4 pillars in your life to create that, and how you're gonna take that same model and flip it to get from 1 to 10.
Mhm.
I'm so excited. This
That's
is
awesome. Yeah.
great. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. It was awesome conversation. I think I told you last time, right? There's energy drainers and energy providers, and I feel energized after this discussions.
Me too. Me
So
too.
good. Yeah.
I can't be more grateful. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Same here.